The marketplace stank of rotting vegetables and unwashed bodies, but Zara had grown used to worse smells during her 3 months as a refugee on Nexus Station. She clutched the worn fabric of her threadbare cloak tighter around her pale blue shoulders as she moved between the crowded stalls. Her large, violet eyes darted nervously from vendor to vendor, searching for someone who might trade a few scraps of food for the small metal trinket she'd found in the station's waste disposal unit. The Kithany girl had been beautiful once, back on her homeworld before the war came. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for their graceful movements and musical voices. Now, at barely 16 standard years old, Zara looked like a ghost of her former self. Her silver hair hung in tangled knots, and her once smooth skin bore the marks of malnutrition and stress. The elegant robes of her people had been replaced by whatever scraps she could find or steal. She approached a Gorillian fruit vendor, his massive frame towering over the small stall. His thick, dark fur was well-groomed, and his tusks gleamed with precious metal inlays that marked him as prosperous. When Zara held up her small trinket, hoping to trade it for a piece of overripe fruit, the vendor's small eyes narrowed with disgust. "Get away from here, refugee trash," he growled, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I don't trade with your kind. Go beg somewhere else." Zara's shoulders slumped, but she didn't argue. She'd learned that fighting back only made things worse. She turned to leave, but her empty stomach chose that moment to cramp painfully, causing her to stumble and accidentally bump into the vendor's display. A single piece of fruit rolled onto the ground. The Gorillian's roar of rage echoed through the marketplace. "Thieving scum!" He grabbed Zara by the arm with one massive hand, lifting her off the ground. "You knocked that fruit down on purpose." "No, please," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." But the vendor wasn't listening. He drew back his free hand, ready to strike the helpless girl. Around them, other beings in the marketplace either looked away or watched with cruel interest. No one moved to help. Refugees had no rights on Nexus Station, especially Kithany refugees. Their homeworld had been on the losing side of the recent war, making them unwelcome throughout civilized space. Zara closed her eyes and waited for the blow that would likely break several bones. The Gorillian's hand was the size of her entire head, and his species was known for their incredible strength. She thought of her family, killed in the bombardment of their city, and wondered if she would finally join them. The blow never came. "Hey!" The voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried an odd authority that made the vendor pause. "Put her down." Zara opened her eyes to see a figure she hadn't noticed before. The being was tall, but not massive like the Gorillian, with pale skin marked by what looked like old scars. His hair was dark and unkempt, and his clothes were even more ragged than her own. But what struck her most were his eyes. They were brown and warm, but they held a hardness that seemed to go deeper than his years. "This doesn't concern you, human," the vendor snarled, though Zara noticed he didn't immediately dismiss the stranger as he had her. "The little thief tried to steal from me." The human stepped closer, and Zara could see now that he was young, perhaps in his early 20s. His movements were fluid and controlled, like a predator trying not to spook its prey. "She bumped into your stall by accident. I saw the whole thing." "Lies!" The Gorillian tightened his grip on Zara's arm, making her gasp in pain. "These Kithany are all thieves and liars. The galaxy is better off without them." Something dangerous flickered in the human's eyes. "Put her down." Each word was spoken with quiet intensity that made several nearby beings take an involuntary step back. The vendor laughed, but the sound was forced. "Or what? You'll fight me, human? You're barely half my size." The human smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Size isn't everything. What happened next took place so quickly that most observers missed it entirely. The human moved forward in a blur of motion, his hand striking the Gorillian's wrist in a precise spot that made the massive being's grip loosen involuntarily. As Zara dropped to the ground, The human caught her gently with one arm while his other hand found the vendor's throat. I said, "Put her down," the human repeated calmly, as if he wasn't holding a being 3 times his mass at bay with apparent ease. "Now, about your attitude problem." The Gorillian's eyes bulged as he struggled against the human's grip, but he couldn't break free. Around them, the marketplace had gone silent. Other beings watched in shock as the small human controlled the situation with what appeared to be minimal effort. "She's hungry," the human continued conversationally. "She's alone, she's scared, and she accidentally bumped into your stall. A decent being would have offered to help her, not threatened to beat her to death." The vendor made strangled sounds of protest, his thick fingers clawing uselessly at the human's arm. But the human's grip didn't budge, and his expression remained eerily calm. "Now, here's what's going to happen," the human said. "You're going to give her some food. Good food, not scraps. You're going to do it with a smile. And you're going to remember that refugees are people too, not animals to be abused for sport." He released the vendor's throat, and the massive Gorillian staggered backward, gasping and clutching his neck. For a moment, the marketplace held its collective breath, waiting to see if the vendor would attack or flee. Instead, the Gorillian reached into his stall with shaking hands and pulled out a bag of fresh fruit. He thrust it toward Zara without meeting her eyes. "Take it," he mumbled. "Take it and go." The human nodded approvingly. "Much better." He turned to Zara, his expression softening. "Are you hurt?" Zara stared up at him in amazement. In 3 months of life as a refugee, no one had shown her kindness. No one had stood up for her. No one had even acknowledged that she was a living being deserving of basic dignity. She tried to speak, but found her voice wouldn't work. "It's okay," the human said gently. "You're safe now." He glanced around at the watching crowd, and his expression hardened again. "All of you, back to your business. Show's over." The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Zara heard fragments of conversation, surprised comments about human strength, confused discussions about why anyone would help a Kithani refugee, and fearful whispers about what the human might be capable of. When they were relatively alone, the human knelt down to Zara's level. Up close, she could see more details about him. His clothes were patched and worn, suggesting he wasn't much better off than she was. His hands bore calluses and small scars that spoke of hard labor or perhaps fighting. But his eyes remained kind when he looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Zara," she whispered, finally finding her voice. "Zara Theinvel Morith, daughter of—" She stopped. Her father's titles meant nothing now. He was dead, along with everyone else she'd ever known. "Just Zara is fine," the human said with understanding. "I'm Marcus. Marcus Chun." He stood and offered her his hand. "You can't stay here. This marketplace isn't safe for someone like you, especially not alone." Zara looked up at him uncertainly. "Why did you help me? No one helps Kithani anymore. We're the enemy." Marcus's expression darkened. "You're not the enemy. You're a kid who's hungry and scared and far from home." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I know what it's like to be alone, but I have nothing to offer you," Zara said. "I can't pay you, or I'm not asking for payment." Marcus extended his hand again. "I'm offering help. There's a difference." Zara stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Every instinct she developed during her months as a refugee told her to be suspicious. People didn't help without expecting something in return. There had to be a catch, some hidden price she'd be expected to pay. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of being hungry and cold and alone, and something in Marcus's eyes told her that he meant what he said. She took his hand. Marcus helped her to her feet, and she was surprised by how steady his grip was. Despite his ragged appearance, there was a strength in him that went beyond the physical power he'd displayed with the vendor. It was the kind of strength that came from surviving things that should have broken a person. "Where are we going?" Zara asked as Marcus led her away from the marketplace. "Somewhere safer than this," Marcus replied. "There's a section of the station that most people avoid. It's not pretty, but The security forces don't patrol there much, and the other residents mind their own business. As they walked through the crowded corridors of Nexus Station, Zara found herself studying her unlikely savior. Marcus moved with a confidence that seemed out of place for someone who was obviously as poor as she was. Other beings stepped aside for him without seeming to realize they were doing it, as if some primitive instinct warned them to give him space. "Are you a refugee too?" Zara asked. Marcus was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. Something like that. They passed through several different sections of the station, each one seeming to grow more run down than the last. The polished metal corridors of the commercial district gave way to dimmer passages with flickering lights and walls stained by years of neglect. The air grew thicker with the smell of industrial chemicals and unwashed bodies. "This is where people come when they have nowhere else to go," Marcus explained as they walked. "Station security doesn't like to come down here unless they absolutely have to. Too many dark corners, too many people with nothing left to lose." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooler air in this section of the station. "Is it dangerous?" "Everything's dangerous when you're alone," Marcus said. "But it's manageable when you know what you're doing. And when people know not to mess with you." They turned a corner into a wider corridor lined with what appeared to be abandoned shops and storage units. A few beings sat in doorways or lounged against walls, mostly refugees from various species, all bearing the same look of desperate exhaustion that Zara recognized in herself. Marcus stopped in front of a door that looked no different from dozens of others they passed. He pressed his palm against a small scanner, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. "Home sweet home," he said with a wry smile. Zara followed him inside and was surprised by what she found. The space was small but clean, with a few basic pieces of furniture and what appeared to be a tiny kitchen unit. The walls were bare metal, but someone had made an effort to make the place livable. A few books were stacked on a makeshift table, and a blanket was folded neatly on the narrow bed. "It's not much," Marcus said, seeing her look around. "But it's mine, and for now it's yours too." Zara turned to stare at him. "You're letting me stay here?" "What?" Marcus set the bag of fruit the vendor had given her on the table and began looking through the small kitchen unit. "Because everyone deserves a safe place to sleep," he said simply. "Because you're just a kid who's been through hell. And because—" He paused, his hand stilling on whatever he was searching for. Because I know what it's like to have the entire galaxy decide you're worthless," Marcus finished quietly. "I know what it's like to be abandoned and left to die. I know what it's like to be so hungry you'd risk getting beaten to death for a piece of rotting fruit." He turned to face her, and Zara saw something in his eyes that she recognized, the same deep, aching loneliness that she carried inside herself. "I'm not going to let that happen to you if I can help it," Marcus said. "Not while I'm still breathing." Zara felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She thought she was beyond crying, that the last few months had burned away her capacity for such displays of emotion. But standing in this small, clean room with this strange human who had risked himself to help her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. "Hope." "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus smiled, a real smile this time, not the dangerous expression he'd worn in the marketplace. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us." "Work? Staying alive on a station like this isn't easy," Marcus explained. "Especially for people like us. There are rules down here, unwritten ones that could get you killed if you break them. There are predators who see refugees as easy targets. And there are secrets that some very powerful people would kill to protect." Zara felt some of her hope dim. "What kind of secrets?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing how much he should tell her. "The kind that explain why there are so many refugees here in the first place," he said finally. "The kind that might explain why a war that should have ended months ago is still dragging on. The kind that certain people don't want getting out." "You sound like you know something specific." "I might," Marcus admitted, "but that's a conversation for later when you're stronger and safer. For now, let's focus on getting some food into you and making sure you get some rest." He pulled a package of what looked like protein bars from the kitchen unit and handed her one. It's not gourmet, but it's nutritious. When did you last eat a real meal? Zara tried to remember and realized she couldn't. Days, maybe? I found some scraps yesterday, but before that, she shrugged helplessly. Marcus's expression hardened again. Bastards, he muttered under his breath. Then, louder, well, that ends now. You gotta eat regular meals, get clean clothes, and sleep in a real bed. No arguments. But I can't pay you back, Zara protested. I told you, I'm not asking for payment. But everyone wants something, Zara said desperately. Everyone always wants something. What do you want from me? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face. I want you to live, he said finally. I want you to be safe. I want you to remember that you're worth something, that your life has value, even when the rest of the galaxy seems determined to convince you otherwise. He moved to a small storage locker and pulled out what appeared to be clothes, simple but clean garments that looked like they might actually fit her. There's a washroom through that door, he said, pointing to a small alcove she hadn't noticed. Get cleaned up, put on these clothes, and then we'll talk about what comes next. Zara took the clothes with trembling hands. Marcus, why are you doing this? Really? Marcus looked at her with those deep brown eyes that seemed to hold so much pain and experience. Because someone did it for me once, he said quietly. A long time ago when I was younger and stupider and thought the galaxy was going to kill me. Someone took a chance on me when they didn't have to. What happened to them? They saved my life, Marcus said. And then they taught me how to save myself. I figure it's time I passed that favor along. Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She made her way to the washroom, clutching the clean clothes to her chest like a lifeline. As she cleaned herself for the first time in weeks and put on clothes that actually fit, she found herself thinking about the strange human who had appeared in her darkest moment like some kind of guardian angel. There was clearly more to Marcus Chun than met the eye. The way he'd handled the Gorillion vendor suggested training and experience far beyond what a simple refugee should possess. And his comments about secrets and ongoing wars hinted at knowledge that could be dangerous. But for the first time in months, Zara felt safe. For the first time since her world had burned, she had hoped that tomorrow might be better than today. She didn't know that Marcus was standing on the other side of the door, checking a small communication device hidden in his belongings. She didn't know that he'd been watching her for days, waiting for the right moment to approach. She didn't know that her rescue wasn't quite as random as it had appeared. What she didn't know yet was that Marcus Chun had been a lot of things in his 24 years: soldier, spy, assassin, and survivor. What she didn't know was that the war that had destroyed her world was far from over, and that she might be more important to its outcome than anyone realized. What she didn't know was that by following the destitute human who had whispered, "Follow me," in her moment of greatest need, she had just taken the first step into a larger conflict that would reshape the galaxy. But for now, clean and fed and safe for the first time in months, Zara was content to simply be alive and no longer alone. The rest could wait until tomorrow. Zara woke to the unfamiliar sensation of being warm and comfortable. For a moment, she lay still with her eyes closed, afraid that opening them would reveal this had all been a dream. But the soft mattress beneath her and the clean blanket covering her remained real. Somewhere nearby, she could hear the quiet sounds of someone moving around, and the smell of actual cooked food reached her nose. She opened her eyes to find Marcus standing at the small kitchen unit, stirring something in a heating pot. He'd changed clothes since yesterday, trading his ragged outfit for simple but clean garments that revealed more of his lean frame. Zara could see now that while he was thin, it wasn't the unhealthy thinness of malnutrition like her own. Marcus was built like someone who had trained his body to be a weapon. "Morning," he said without turning around, somehow sensing she was awake. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Zara admitted, sitting up slowly. Her body still ached from months of poor nutrition and sleeping in cold, uncomfortable places, but she felt more rested than she had since leaving her homeworld. "Good. Breakfast is almost ready." Marcus ladled something that smelled wonderfully savory into two bowls and brought one over to her. Real protein, actual vegetables, and some grain that isn't mostly filler. Your body needs nutrients if it's going to heal. Zara accepted the bowl gratefully and took her first spoonful. The food was simple but delicious, seasoned with herbs she didn't recognize, but that tasted like comfort itself. Where did you learn to cook? Here and there, Marcus said evasively, settling into the room's single chair with his own bowl. You pick things up when you've been on your own for a while. As they ate, Zara found herself studying her rescuer more carefully. In the better light of his quarters, she could see details she'd missed the night before. The scars on his hands weren't just from hard labor. Some of them looked like they came from weapons. His movements were controlled and precise, even when doing something as simple as eating. And his eyes never stopped moving, constantly checking the door and the small window that looked out into the corridor. Marcus, she said carefully, what did you do before you came here? He looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell her. I was in the military, he said finally. Human Defense Forces. Special Operations. That explains a lot. What happened? The same thing that always happens to soldiers when politicians decide they're inconvenient. Marcus replied with bitter humor. I knew too much about things I wasn't supposed to know about, so they cut me loose. Zara frowned. But humans are part of the Galactic Alliance. Your government wouldn't just abandon their own soldiers. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sweet kid, you have a lot to learn about how the galaxy really works. Governments abandon their own people all the time when it's convenient. My unit was operating in sectors we weren't supposed to be in, fighting battles that officially never happened, gathering intelligence that certain people wanted to keep buried. What kind of intelligence? The kind that proves this war isn't what everyone thinks it is, Marcus said quietly. The kind that shows certain member species of the Alliance have been playing both sides, selling weapons to enemies while publicly supporting the war effort. The kind that reveals some very important people have been getting very rich off the suffering of refugees like you. Zara set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. You're saying the war that destroyed my world was intentionally prolonged. I'm saying the war that destroyed your world was engineered from the beginning, Marcus corrected grimly. Your people weren't targeted because they were a military threat. They were targeted because your planet sits on one of the richest deposits of quantum crystals in the galaxy, and certain corporations wanted access to those resources without having to pay fair market prices to the legitimate government. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She'd known her homeworld was rich in quantum crystals. They powered faster-than-light travel and communications throughout the galaxy. But she'd been told the invasion was because her people had allied with enemies of the Alliance, because they represented a threat to galactic peace. That's not. She began, then stopped. Deep down, she'd always known the official story didn't make sense. Her people had been peaceful, more interested in art and philosophy than military conquest. They'd had no reason to ally with anyone who threatened the Alliance. It's a lot to take in, Marcus said gently, seeing her shock. I know it's hard to accept that the people you trusted, the institutions you believed in, might not be what they seem. How do you know all this? Because my unit was sent to gather evidence of what was really happening. We spent months documenting the illegal arms sales, the corporate payoffs, the deliberate intelligence failures that allowed enemy forces to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Marcus's hands tightened into fists. We had proof that could have ended the war years ago and brought the real criminals to justice. Most of my team is dead now, killed in what was officially an enemy ambush, but was actually an assassination carried out by Alliance Black Ops. I only survived because I was running a separate mission when they hit the others. Marcus stared into his bowl, lost in dark memories. I've been hiding ever since, try to figure out how to get the information I have to someone who can actually do something with it. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. And now you've told me about it. Does that make me a target too? You were already a target, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Not because of what you know, but because of who you are. I don't understand. Marcus reached into a storage compartment and pulled out a small data pad. He activated it and showed her what appeared to be a photograph of a young Kithany female with silver hair and violet eyes. It was her. "This is from a wanted posting that's been circulating through certain networks for the past 2 months," Marcus explained. "Someone is very interested in finding you, Zara. Someone with enough resources to put a substantial bounty on your head." Zara stared at the image in shock. "But I'm nobody. I'm just a refugee. Why would anyone want me?" "Because you're not just anybody," Marcus said quietly. "You're Zarathine Velmorith, daughter of High Counselor Thane Velmorith. Your father wasn't just a government official. He was the keeper of the quantum crystal mining codes that give access to the most valuable deposits on your homeworld." The revelation hit her like a hammer blow. She'd known her father was important in their government, but she'd had no idea he controlled access to their world's greatest resource. "But those codes died with him, did they?" Marcus asked. "Or were they passed down to his heir, as tradition demanded?" Zara's hand went instinctively to the small pendant she wore around her neck, the only thing of value she'd managed to take when she fled her burning world. It had been her father's, passed down through generations of her family. She thought it was just a sentimental keepsake. Marcus noticed the gesture, and his expression grew grim. "That's it, isn't it? The pendant. It's not just jewelry." With trembling fingers, Zara pulled the pendant from beneath her shirt. It was a simple piece of crystalline material, shaped into an intricate geometric pattern. She'd worn it every day since her father's death, finding comfort in this last connection to her family and her lost home. "He gave it to me the night before the final attack," she whispered. "He said it would keep me safe, that I should never let anyone take it from me. I thought he meant it was just precious to our family." "It is precious," Marcus said, "just not in the way you thought. That pendant contains the quantum crystalline matrix codes that give access to the deep deposits on your homeworld. Whoever controls those codes controls billions of credits worth of resources." Zara sank back onto the bed, overwhelmed by this new understanding. She wasn't just a refugee fleeing a destroyed world. She was potentially the key to vast wealth and power. No wonder someone was hunting her. "The people who orchestrated the war, who arranged for your father's death, they thought they could simply seize control of the mines once your government fell," Marcus continued. "But they didn't count on your father being clever enough to hide the access codes or loyal enough to pass them to his daughter instead of surrendering them. So the war continues because they can't access the resources they wanted to steal," Zara said, understanding dawning on her. "Exactly. Without those codes, the quantum crystal deposits are basically worthless. They can't be extracted safely or efficiently. The invading forces control your world, but they can't claim the prize they were really after." Zara felt a surge of fierce pride. Her father had outsmarted the people who destroyed their world, even in death. But the pride was quickly followed by terror as she realized what this meant for her own survival. "If they find me, if they find you, they'll torture the codes out of you and then kill you to eliminate any future claims to the resources," Marcus said bluntly. "Or they'll keep you alive as a puppet ruler while they strip your world bare. Then I have to run. Get as far away from here as possible." "Running won't work," Marcus said. "They have resources throughout the galaxy. Sooner or later, they'll find you. Your only chance is to go on the offensive." Zara stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we use what you have, those codes, as leverage. We find a way to expose the truth about who really started this war and why. We bring down the people responsible for the deaths of your family and millions of others. Marcus met her eyes steadily. "You helped me figure out something I've been struggling with for months. How to get someone to take my evidence seriously. Nobody wants to listen to a disgraced soldier with a grudge. But the rightful heir to a stolen world, carrying proof of massive corporate conspiracy? That's a story that might actually get attention. You want to use me as bait." "I want to use us as a weapon," Marcus corrected. "You have something they want desperately. I have evidence that could destroy them. Together, we might actually be able to do some good." Zara touched the pendant through her shirt, thinking of her father and the billions of innocent beings who had died in the manufactured war. "It would be dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous. The question is whether you're willing to risk your life to save others, or if you'd rather spend the rest of your life running and hiding. Before Zara could answer, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights started flashing in the corridors outside, and they could hear the sound of security forces mobilizing. Marcus was on his feet instantly, moving to a hidden weapons locker Zara hadn't noticed. "That's a security lockdown alarm," he said grimly, pulling out a military-grade pulse rifle. "Someone's triggered a station-wide search. For me? Probably." Marcus checked the rifle's power cell and slung it over his shoulder. "Grab your things. We're leaving. Now." Zara quickly gathered the few possessions she had, including the bag of fruit from the day before. Her heart was pounding as she realized how quickly her brief sanctuary had become a trap. Marcus was at his communication device, rapidly entering commands. "I'm downloading everything from my files to a secure server," he explained. "If we don't make it out of this, at least the evidence might survive." "Where are we going?" "There's a cargo ship leaving for the Outer Rim in 20 minutes. If we can get to Base 7 without being caught, we might be able to stow away." They could hear heavy footsteps in the corridor now, along with the whine of scanner equipment. The security forces were conducting a thorough search of every unit in this section of the station. Marcus moved to the door and listened carefully. 3 of them, moving systematically. "They'll be here in about 2 minutes. He turned to Zara. "There's a maintenance shaft that connects to the main ventilation system. It's tight, but you should be able to fit. What about you? I'll create a distraction, buy you some time to get away." Marcus pulled a small device from his weapons locker and armed it. "This is a flashbang grenade. When they breach the door, I'll use it to disorient them, then try to lead them away from your escape route." Zara felt panic rising in her chest. "We should stay together. If we stay together, we'll both be caught," Marcus said firmly. "And if they get both of us, then the truth dies with us. Your people's deaths will never be avenged." He moved to a panel in the wall and quickly removed it, revealing a narrow shaft that led into darkness. "Follow this to the main ventilation hub, then take the maintenance corridor that leads to the cargo base. Look for ship registration number XT 7749. That's the one heading for the Outer Rim." "How do you know I can trust that ship?" "Because I've been planning this escape route for weeks," Marcus admitted. "I was just waiting for the right moment to use it." The footsteps in the corridor were getting closer. Zara could hear voices now, security officers calling out instructions to each other as they prepared to search Marcus's quarters. "Go," Marcus urged, helping her into the maintenance shaft. "Remember, Cargo Bay 7, Ship XT 7749. Tell the captain your crew for the Quantum Crystal Survey mission. He'll understand what that means." "What about you?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Don't worry about me. I've been in worse situations than this. Just focus on getting to that ship." Zara wanted to argue, wanted to insist they find another way, but the sound of the security team taking position outside the door made it clear there was no time. She squeezed into the maintenance shaft just as the first scanner beam appeared under the door. "Marcus," she whispered. "Yeah. Thank you. For everything. Thank me by staying alive and making this count," he replied. "Now go." Zara began crawling through the narrow shaft, following its path deeper into the station's infrastructure. Behind her, she heard the door to Marcus's quarters being breached, followed immediately by the flash and bang of his grenade detonating. Shouts of surprise and confusion echoed through the maintenance system. As she crawled through the darkness, guided only by the faint emergency lighting that ran along the shaft's walls, Zara thought about everything Marcus had told her. Her father hadn't just given her a keepsake. He'd entrusted her with the key to bringing justice for their people. The pendant around her neck wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a weapon that could be used to expose the truth and punish the guilty. She thought about Marcus, probably fighting for his life against security forces while buying her time to escape. He'd risked everything to save a stranger, and now he was risking everything again to give her a chance to reach safety. The maintenance shaft branched ahead of her, and she chose the path that seemed to lead toward the cargo bays. As she crawled, she could hear the sounds of the security search echoing through the station's walls. They were being thorough, checking every hiding place, questioning every resident. But Marcus had been right about one thing. She couldn't run forever. The people who had destroyed her world wouldn't give up until they found her. Her only real chance was to go on the offensive, to use the power her father had given her to fight back against the forces that had taken everything from her. She emerged from the maintenance shaft into a dimly lit corridor that smelled of machine oil and recycled air. According to the signs on the walls, Cargo Bay 7 was just ahead. Zara crept carefully through the shadows, listening for any sign that security forces had anticipated her route. The cargo bay was enormous, filled with containers and equipment being loaded onto various ships. She could see the registration numbers painted on the hulls of several vessels, and her heart lifted when she spotted XT 7749 near the far end of the bay. The ship was medium-sized, built for cargo hauling rather than luxury or speed. Its hull was scarred by years of use, but it looked well-maintained and space-worthy. More importantly, she could see crew members moving around near its loading ramp, preparing for departure. Zara took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows. It was time to find out if Marcus's plan would work and whether she had the courage to become the weapon her people needed. As she walked toward ship XT 7749, she touched the pendant beneath her shirt one more time. Her father had trusted her with something precious. Marcus had trusted her with something dangerous. Now it was time to prove that their trust hadn't been misplaced. The captain of ship XT 7749 was not what Zara had expected. She was a middle-aged human woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to see everything. When Zara approached the loading ramp and nervously mentioned the quantum crystal survey mission, the captain had simply nodded and gestured for her to come aboard. "Name's Captain Rivera," the woman said as she led Zara through the ship's cramped corridors. "And you must be the package Marcus was expecting to deliver. He calmed ahead about an hour ago, said you might be coming alone." Zara's heart clenched at the past tense. "Is he?" "Don't know," Rivera admitted. "Lost contact with him when the security lockdown started. But Marcus is resourceful. If anyone can get out of a tight spot, it's him." The ship's interior was functional rather than comfortable, with exposed pipes and conduits running along the walls. Everything was clean and well-maintained, but there were no unnecessary luxuries. This was a working vessel, designed to move cargo efficiently across vast distances. "How do you know Marcus?" Zara asked as they walked. "Old friends," Rivera said vaguely. "We served together back when we both believed in the system. Now we help each other out when we can." She stopped at a small cabin door. "This will be your quarters for the journey. It's not much, but it's private and secure." The cabin was tiny, barely large enough for a single bunk and a small storage locker. But after months of sleeping in abandoned corridors and maintenance shafts, it looked like luxury to Zara. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Officially, we're making a cargo run to the Kepler mining stations on the outer rim. Unofficially," Rivera smiled grimly, "we're going to pay a visit to someone who might be very interested in what you're carrying." Before Zara could ask what she meant, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain to the bridge," a voice called. "We've got clearance for immediate departure." Rivera's expression became serious. "That's earlier than expected. Something must have spooked traffic control." She headed for the door. "Stay here and keep quiet. Once we're in hyperspace, we can talk more freely." Zara felt the ship's engines come to life, a deep rumble that vibrated through the deck plates. She moved to the small porthole in her cabin and watched as the cargo bay outside began to move past. They were lifting off, leaving Nexus Station behind. As the station fell away below them, Zara found herself thinking about Marcus. Was he still alive? Had he escaped the security forces, or had he sacrificed himself to buy her time to get away? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she tried to push it aside. Marcus had made it clear that her mission was more important than any one person's survival. even his own. The transition to hyperspace was smooth, accompanied by the characteristic shimmer of stars stretching into lines outside the porthole. Once they were safely in the faster-than-light corridor that would carry them to their destination, Captain Rivera returned to check on her. "We should reach the outer rim in about 6 days," Rivera explained, settling into the cabin's single chair while Zara sat on the bunk. "That gives us time to prepare you for what comes next, which is a meeting with someone who calls himself the Collector. He specializes in acquiring information that certain powerful people would prefer stayed hidden. More importantly, he has the resources and connections to actually do something with that information." Zara frowned. "Why would he help us?" "Because what you're carrying isn't just valuable to the people who want to exploit your world's resources. It's valuable to anyone who wants to expose the corruption that's been eating away at the Galactic Alliance from within." Rivera leaned forward. "The Collector has been gathering evidence of illegal weapons sales, corporate manipulation of government policy, and deliberate prolonging of conflicts for profit. Your quantum crystal codes could be the final piece he needs to bring down the entire network. And what happens to me after I hand over the codes?" "That depends on what you want," Rivera said. "The Collector could arrange for you to disappear, give you a new identity somewhere safe where you could live quietly. Or you could stay and fight. Use your position as the rightful heir to your world's resources to challenge the occupation in Galactic Court. Demand justice for your people and compensation for the illegal seizure of your planet." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Zara had spent months thinking of herself as a powerless refugee, someone to be pitted or ignored. The thought that she could actually fight back, that she could demand justice for her family and her people, was almost overwhelming. "What would Marcus want me to do?" Rivera smiled sadly. "Marcus would want you to choose for yourself. He spent his whole life following other people's orders, fighting other people's wars. I think he'd want you to decide your own fate." Over the next several days, as the ship traveled through hyperspace toward the outer rim, Zara found herself learning more about both Captain Rivera and the broader situation she'd become part of. Rivera had been a military intelligence officer before going freelance, specializing in exposing corruption within the Alliance's military structure. She'd worked with Marcus on several operations that had officially never happened. "The Alliance isn't evil," Rivera explained during one of their conversations in the ship's small galley. "But it's gotten too big, too bureaucratic. There are too many opportunities for people with power to abuse that power, and not enough oversight to stop them. So you fight them from outside the system?" "We fight the corrupt elements within the system," Rivera corrected. "There's still good people in the Alliance military and government. They just need help cutting out the cancer that's been growing inside their institutions." Zara also learned more about the mysterious Collector they were traveling to meet. According to Rivera, he was a former Alliance intelligence analyst who had discovered evidence of massive corruption within the organization he'd devoted his life to serving. Rather than try to work within a compromised system, he'd gone rogue and established his own network of informants and allies. "He's not interested in profit or power," Rivera assured her. "He just wants the truth to come to light. But he's careful about who he works with and how he operates. Too many good people have died trying to expose the wrong secrets to the wrong people." On the 4th day of their journey, they received an encrypted communication from an unknown source. Rivera took the message in her private quarters, but Zara could tell from the captain's grim expression afterward that it wasn't good news. "What is it?" Zara asked. "Marcus," Rivera said quietly. "He didn't make it off the station." Zara felt the words hit her like a physical blow. She'd been trying not to think about what might have happened to Marcus, hoping against hope that he'd somehow escaped. But deep down, she'd known that someone as principled as Marcus wouldn't have run away while others were in danger. "Ow!" "The details are sketchy, but it looks like he held off the security forces long enough for 3 other refugees to escape along with you. He was captured in..." Rivera trailed off. And the official report says he died resisting arrest. But The unofficial word is that he was executed after being interrogated about information regarding quantum crystal mining operations. Zara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by grief and guilt. Marcus had died protecting people he barely knew, including her. He'd sacrificed himself so that she could carry on the fight he'd started. "I'm sorry," Rivera said gently. "I know you'd only known him for a short time, but Marcus had that effect on people. He made you believe that good things were possible, even in the darkest circumstances." "He saved my life," Zara whispered. "He saved my life, and then he died for it." "He died for a lot more than that," Rivera said firmly. "He died because he believed that justice mattered more than survival. He died because he thought the truth was worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible." That night, alone in her cabin, Zara made her decision. She wouldn't just hand over the quantum crystal codes and disappear into obscurity. She would use every resource at her disposal to expose the people responsible for Marcus's death, for her family's death, for the deaths of millions of innocent beings who had been sacrificed on the altar of corporate greed. She would make Marcus's sacrifice count. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near the Outer Rim mining stations, Zara was struck by how different this region of space looked from the core worlds. Here, stars were sparse, and the mining installations floated like tiny islands of light in an ocean of darkness. It was a frontier region, where Alliance law was flexible and people minded their own business. Captain Rivera guided their ship to a seemingly abandoned mining platform that had been converted into a way station for travelers and traders. As they docked, Zara could see that despite its rundown appearance, the station was bustling with activity. Ships of all sizes and configurations were coming and going, and the docking bays were filled with beings from dozens of different species. "Welcome to Freeport Station," Rivera said as they prepared to disembark. "It's officially a neutral trading post, but unofficially it's the headquarters of the largest information brokerage operation in this sector." They were met at the airlock by a tall, thin being that Zara didn't immediately recognize. He had pale blue skin and large, dark eyes, with 4 arms that ended in delicate, long-fingered hands. When he spoke, his voice was melodious despite the mechanical translator he wore around his neck. "Captain Rivera," he said with what might have been a smile, "the collector is expecting you. Please follow me." They were led through corridors that were far more luxurious than the station's external appearance had suggested. The walls were lined with what appeared to be genuine artworks from across the galaxy, and the lighting was warm and welcoming rather than the harsh utility illumination common on most space stations. "The collector has eclectic tastes," their guide explained, noticing Zara's surprised expression. "He believes that beauty and truth are connected in fundamental ways." They passed through several security checkpoints, each one more sophisticated than the last. Zara realized that despite its remote location, this station was probably one of the most secure facilities in the galaxy. Finally, they were ushered into a large, circular chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed a slowly shifting view of the stars outside. At the center of the room sat a figure that was immediately striking, an elderly human male with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see everything. "Zarathan Vel Morath," he said, rising from his chair with surprising grace. "I am honored to meet the daughter of High Counselor Thane Vel Morath. Your father was a good man who died trying to protect his people from a terrible injustice." Zara found herself studying the collector carefully. He was dressed simply but elegantly, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who was older than he appeared. But what struck her most was the intelligence in his eyes and the genuine warmth in his smile. "You knew my father?" "We corresponded occasionally," the collector admitted. "Your father was one of the few government officials who was genuinely concerned about corporate influence on Alliance policy. He tried to warn people about what was coming, but unfortunately, his warnings were ignored by those who should have listened." The collector gestured for them to sit in comfortable chairs arranged around a low table. "I understand you carry something that certain people are very eager to obtain." Zara touched the pendant beneath her shirt. The quantum crystal mining codes for my homeworld. Among other things, yes. The collector's expression grew serious. But you also carry something far more valuable. The moral authority to challenge the entire system that allowed this injustice to occur. I don't understand. You are not just a refugee or a holder of valuable codes, the collector explained. You are the legitimate government of a sovereign world that was illegally invaded and occupied. In the eyes of galactic law, you have the right to demand justice not just for yourself, but for all the victims of this manufactured conflict. The collector activated a holographic display that showed a complex web of connections between corporations, government officials, and military leaders. For years, I've been documenting the network of corruption that has infected the highest levels of the Alliance. Arms dealers selling weapons to both sides of conflicts. Politicians taking bribes to ignore violations of interspecies law. Military leaders falsifying intelligence reports to justify profitable wars. He highlighted one section of the web. The invasion of your homeworld was orchestrated by Nexus Dynamics Corporation in cooperation with several high-ranking Alliance officials. They wanted access to your quantum crystal deposits without having to pay fair market prices or respect your people's sovereignty. Marcus told me something similar, Zara said quietly. Marcus Chun was a good soldier who discovered the truth at great personal cost, the collector said solemnly. His evidence forms part of this case, but it's not complete without your testimony and the proof you carry. Zara realized that this was the moment of decision Marcus had prepared her for. She could hand over the codes and walk away, or she could choose to fight. She thought of her father, of her family, of all the people who had died in the manufactured war. She thought of Marcus, who had died protecting strangers because he believed justice mattered more than survival. She pulled the pendant from around her neck and set it on the table. What I need to do? The collector smiled, and for the first time since her world had burned, Zara felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. We're going to bring down the most powerful criminal organization in the galaxy, he said simply. We're going to expose the truth, demand justice, and make sure that what happened to your people never happens again. Ow! By using the one weapon they never expected you to possess, the collector replied. Hope. The hope that justice is possible, that the truth matters, and that ordinary people can fight back against seemingly impossible odds. As they began to plan their campaign against the forces that had destroyed so many lives, Zara found herself thinking of Marcus's word from their first night together. He told her that everyone deserves to remember that their life has value, that they're worth something even when the galaxy seems determined to convince them otherwise. Looking around the room at Captain Rivera, the collector, and their various allies, Zara realized that Marcus had been right about something else too. Sometimes, when you're facing impossible odds, the best thing you can do is find other people who believe in the same impossible things you do. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very determined, you might just prove that the impossible is actually inevitable.